Hi, I'm Konstantin Baum, Master of Wine, and I often taste expensive wines on this channel. But today I'm going to taste some of the cheapest wines in the world. I spent 50 euros, probably the average price per bottle on this channel, at Aldi, and I got 10 bottles for that price. So will I find some gems in this lineup? Let's find out. The discount chain Aldi is one of the biggest wine retailers in the world. But the wines that can be found on those shelves don't, how can I put it, they don't represent the best of the best. But they have improved their selection over the last few decades, and it's the place where some people might pick up their first bottle before getting really interested in wine. The thing that wine nerds often forget is that some people can't and most people don't want to spend a lot of money on food and wine. The average price per bottle in Germany is 2.34 euros, and most of Aldi's wines are around that price point. So what can you expect from 750 milliliters of fermented grape juice, when that price also includes the cost of the label, the bottle, the capsule, the cork, shipping, taxes, and Aldi's profit margin? Okay, Aldi, here I come. I almost never buy wine at Aldi, but I went to a shop close to my home and looked through their shelves. Their selection isn't very inspiring, but they have wines from all around the world. Some have actually received higher scores from more or less reputable publications, and they also sell lesser known grape varieties and wine styles. I want to stress that I did look for wines that looked interesting, as I really wanted to find some bargains for you. So let's dig in. So let's start with something sparkling. I actually thought that this was a Prosecco, but upon closer inspection I realized that this is not a Prosecco. It doesn't say Prosecco anywhere on the label. It says Secco, but that's a different thing. That's a term for the dryness level of the wine. So this is just a Vino Spumante from Galadino, and it retailed for 4.99 euros. You have to bear in mind that in Germany you actually have to pay €1.02 for a bottle of sparkling wine in taxes. So, well, you have to factor that into the price. So there's even less money left for the content of that bottle. So on the label, you don't really get a lot of information. It says it's from Italy, but it doesn't say from where it is in Italy. Prosecco would be from Veneto or Friuli, Venezia, Giulia in the northeast of the country. This could be from anywhere. It also doesn't tell you which grape variety it is. In Prosecco, it would be mainly Glera, but here it could be anything. It just says Cuvée. I haven't popped a cork in a while, so I think it's time. Come on, you can do it. Let's go. But don't hit the mic. Oh. Well, that's not the way you should do it in a restaurant, but it's more fun like that, isn't it? So the wine smells weirdly exotic, so it's quite ripe in fruit character. It smells of apricots, pineapple, and all that kind of stuff. So it doesn't really smell like Prosecco, which would be more green apple-y in flavor. So the wine tastes pretty sweet. It is labeled Secco, which means dry, but Secco wines or dry wines can be between 17 and 32 grams of residual sugar. So that's actually quite a lot of sweetness, and you can feel that in here. So this is a well-made wine, but it's actually quite boring, quite exotic and fruity in flavor, and the texture is just too sweet in my opinion. So it lacks some excitement on the palate. I'm going to rate this 76 points. I think it's okay. It won't kill you, but it's also not really good. So next up we have a Crémant de Loire, and I'm not going to do this again. I will destroy a camera eventually. Crémant de Loire is actually oftentimes a very good value. The wines come from the Loire region. They tend to be quite clean, pristine, fresh. They usually have quite a lot of yeasty character that you know from Champagne, for example. They don't have the same intensity, and they don't get as exciting, or you won't get as excited when tasting them as with the best champagnes, but there are some really good examples. Let's see whether this is one of them. So this Marquis de Beaucel is actually one of the most expensive wines in the lineup, €6.49, and it looks all right. If you're into yeasty flavors like the brioche notes that you get from Champagne, this isn't for you, but it actually has quite a nice Chenin Blanc dominated bouquet, so there's quite a lot of fruit flavor coming through, not like overly blousy flavors like the Secco from before, and more refined flavors. So it's actually quite nice. On the palate, it has good freshness. It's light, but it is pretty, yeah, it's okay. This gets 80 points from me. I think it's actually pretty good. Nothing more than that, but it's pretty good. Yeah. The next wine is the Bernardo Vinho Verde from Portugal. Vinho Verde can be quite exciting. There are some really good wines coming out of that region, but I'm not guessing this is one of them. I don't really know why it's in a blue bottle. So there's like this slightly blue tinge to the bottle. Is that appealing to anyone? Not to me, but I bought it because I thought Vinho Verde, maybe it's a good Vinho Verde. Let's see. It actually retails for €2.79, which is pretty cheap. And it isn't blue, fortunately. So it's slightly fizzy. There's quite a bit of CO2 in here, which, well, isn't like a great indicator for quality. On top of that, it only has 9% of alcohol. You can see that on the label. And that indicates to me that it's probably sweet or off dry. So most Vinho Verdes in that style aren't great, but let's give it a chance. The wine itself smells quite artificial. It's the kind of flavor that you get when you rip open a bag of gummy bears and put your nose into it. So, well, that's not really something I like, but it's clean and smells artificial. On the palate, it's actually not too sweet. There's good grip there. The acidity is fresh. So this is okay. I mean, I wouldn't want to drink it, but if there was nothing else to drink, I might drink a little bit of it just to refresh my palate. I'm going to rate it 77 points. It's an average wine, but it's well made. You can drink it. It won't hurt you. You might not even get drunk from it because it's so low in alcohol. So the next wine is the Fiori del Sud Zibibbo from Sicilia. And that's kind of interesting because Zibibbo is a grape variety that is a little bit under the radar. They sell it as part of their seasonal wine selection line. And it's interesting that they have that on their shelves because it's a little bit of a specialty item. It retails for €3.79. So, well, I mean, Sicily is actually oftentimes a little bit cheaper. So maybe there's something good there. Let's just try it first. The thing that triggers me a little bit is that this wine received a rating of 97 points from Luca Maroni. If you haven't seen the video, check it out. I'll link it up somewhere up there. The wine smells of oranges, apple. On the palate, it's actually quite fresh and grippy, and there's good acidity there, a little bit of texture even. So this is quite interesting. So this is actually the best wine so far. I'm going to rate this 82 points. I think it has some, well, it's quite appealing. There's quite a lot of stuff going on. It's not super complex, but it's interesting. And it retails for €3.79. So at that price point, it's actually really good. So next up, we have the 2021 Vin d'Alsace Gewürztraminer. It also says exquisite collection, which doesn't mean anything. It's bottled by one of the biggest producers in France, Les Grands Chais de France, which actually literally translates to the big sellers of France. And let's taste it. Gewürztraminer can actually be really delicious. It's very aromatic and intense, but it has its place in the wine scene, and it's oftentimes a little bit, well, under the radar right now. So maybe there's something good in here. It retails for €5.99, so it's one of the more premium wines in this tasting, and it has one of those super cheap little plastic corks, which, well, it's not something I like. It doesn't really say all that much about the wine. Well, it does say something about the wine. You know, while the packaging doesn't impact the wine all that much, a little plastic cork doesn't damage the wine if it's not stored for a long time under that closure. It still indicates that it's probably not a great wine because a real winemaker who produces a product that he's really proud of would probably use either a proper cork or a screw cap. The wine smells of lychees, rose petals, exotic fruit flavors like mango. It's not the most intense and complex Gewürztraminer I've tasted, but you could identify it as a Gewürztraminer in a blind tasting. On the palate, it's off dry, as it says on the label. There's a little indicator at the back of the label, which is useful, but it also has grip, good freshness. Yeah, it's all right. I'm going to rate it 80 points. I think it's solid with a nice piece of Munster cheese. This would actually be quite a nice pairing. So next up, we have the 2022 Sauvignon Blanc from Oliver and Friends in the Pfalz. Oliver and Friends is a brand created by Oliver Zeter, who is a wine producer that has become quite popular in Germany over the last few years. And let's screw this open. The grape variety Sauvignon Blanc is gaining momentum in Germany. It's getting more and more popular, and there are some producers that make really good Sauvignons. This one was actually rated 89 plus points from Falstaff, which is a pretty high score. And I never really know why they do this plus thing, and they almost never put a minus behind the score. So I don't really get it. Just make it 89 or 90, but you don't really have to go in between 89 and 90. That's my opinion, at least. That's a bit of a bummer. I actually like the wines from Oliver Zeter, so I thought this might be good too, but it isn't. You know, Sauvignon Blanc lives off its intensity of flavor, the combo of grassy notes, citrus fruit, and maybe even exotic fruit flavors, and it usually has lots of freshness on the palate. But this kind of doesn't have any of that. The nose is weirdly muted. There's just a little bit of lemon and lime character coming through. And on the palate, it's actually quite flat, and it doesn't really have a lot of freshness and grip. So yeah, I'm going to rate this 78 points. It's just an average wine, not really good, even in the context of Aldi. It retails for €6.99, so it's the most expensive wine in the tasting. And it certainly isn't the best. The next one is the 1300 Toskana IGT from Frescobaldi. 1300 is not the price. It retails for €4.99. That's the year when the Frescobaldi family started to get into wine. So they are one of the oldest winemaking families in the world. And that's also one of the reasons why I bought it. They usually produce really great wines. And let's see whether they can do what they do at the top level at this entry level as well. So this is another plastic cork. I can already see it from here. So according to the back label, the Frescobaldi family started making wine in the 14th century, which is completely crazy. Wine is such an old cultural product that you sometimes forget that people have been making that stuff for such a long time. They certainly haven't used plastic corks back then, but anyhow, there isn't any information on the grape varieties used in this blend. It just says cuvée on the back label. So, well, let's see whether we can find out. It smells quite fruit-driven, of cherries and black tea. It's quite clean on the nose. It's not complex at all. The thing is, on the palate, it just gets a little bit harsh, a little green, quite grippy. So that's not necessarily something that I enjoy too much. Overall, this is a solid effort. It's not a profound wine, not a complex wine at all, but it is actually quite typical for Tuscany, and there's nothing wrong with it. So I'm going to rate it 80 points. I think it's a decent wine at that price point. It's really okay, but it's not even close to the best of what Frescobaldi is producing. So next up, we have the 2021 Baron Philippe de Rothschild Cabernet Sauvignon. The family is well known in Bordeaux. They own Mouton, Rothschild, and they produce some awesome wines there. But this is actually not from Bordeaux. It's a Cabernet Sauvignon from Pays d'Oc, so from the south of France. It therefore also doesn't retail for hundreds of euros. It retails for €4.99 at Aldi. And they actually had enough money to spend on a natural cork. Well, so this seems to be a pure Cabernet Sauvignon. They could actually add other grape varieties without mentioning them on the label. But maybe this is 100% Cabernet. Cabernet has this great reputation all around the world, even though it's a grape variety that you can grow in many different places and you can produce great wines from it, but you can also produce pretty mediocre wines from Cabernet. The wine smells of black currants, a little bit of vanilla and spice notes. I would imagine they might have shipped this wine, as this at this price point probably wasn't aged in barriques, and this weird combo of fruit flavor and vanilla notes would suggest to me that they might have used oak chips here. On the palate, it has lots of tannins, and that's the issue with cheap Cabernet Sauvignon. Sometimes the tannins are just too rough and they appear a little bit green, quite harsh. Yeah, I don't really enjoy that. So I will rate this 78 points. It's an average Cabernet. Yeah, not more than that. So the next wine is the 2022 Forest Hill Shiraz Cabernet. Shiraz is the name the Australians use for Syrah. And this wine is actually from Australia, but it was bottled in Germany. Quite a lot of these cheap wines are actually bought in bulk and then shipped in containers to the market of consumption. It is cheaper to do that. Instead of shipping those heavy bottles, you just ship the wines. And you can also adjust the wines to the requirements of the market. And on top of that, as a producer, you don't even have to put your name onto the label. So if you produce bad wine, it's quite difficult to trace it back to you. So this smells of plums, cinnamon. There's also a little bit of chocolate powder flavor coming through. Well, it's not really interesting if you smell it, but I can see that some people might like that profile. On the palate, it's actually very short. There's not much there. There's not much tannin structure even. It just kind of rolls over your tongue and then it's gone. The finish is actually incredibly short. It's amazing for a wine this intense in flavor to just disappear on your palate. I'm going to rate this 77 points. I think it's a boring wine. But again, it's not something that hurts you. There are no flaws there. It's actually quite clean, but it's boring. The last wine in the lineup is the Campo Antico Primitivo from Puglia. It's quite an interesting wine. It's actually €4.99. It's organic certified. It has 97 points from Luca Maroni, obviously. And it has a wax capsule. And this is the first wine under a wax capsule I've ever seen in a discount market. Maybe there have been others before, but this is really something that is more associated with artisan products. Lots of natural wine producers put their wines under wax capsules. So this is kind of special. So I'm going to go the easy route and I'm just going to pull out the cork like that. Let's see. Primitivo is the same grape variety as Zinfandel in the US, and it's very popular in Germany. The wines tend to be a little bit very concentrated, a little bit sweet, even like off dry at least. And some of them are really boring. Quite a lot of them are really boring. Organic viticulture is usually more difficult and therefore the wines have to be more expensive than normal wines. But in some parts of the world, it's actually fairly easy to work in an organic way. In the south of Italy, the temperatures are pretty high in summer. There's not a lot of rain and therefore it's not that difficult to work in an organic way. The wine smells of dried fruit. There's raisin character, prune character coming through. There's a little bit of cherry flavor as well. On the palate, it's actually quite juicy with a little bit of residual sugar. It's not really sweet, but it just feels quite round and rich. It's okay. I think it lacks intensity, even though the fruit flavor is concentrated, like dried fruit flavor. It still doesn't really fill the glass. For me, this is a 79-point wine. So once again, Luca and I disagree on a wine, but I'm just sure this isn't a 97-point wine. All right, that was uninspiring. I mean, the wines were okay. There were no flawed wines here in this lineup. They did what they had to do, but there weren't really wines that I would enjoy drinking. Surprisingly, two wines that I like quite a bit were the Zibibbo, which was actually one of the cheaper wines in the lineup, and the Crémant, which was one of the more high-end wines. I would drink 1 or 2 glasses of that, but not much more. I think if you spend a little bit more, you might actually get something that is way more interesting. This is just wine. You can drink it. It might get you a little bit tipsy, but that's kind of it. So thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, then please like it down here. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so already. My question of the day is, do you drink wine from Aldi? Do you have any recommendations? Let me know down below. I hope I see you guys again very soon. Until then, stay thirsty.